50 and in Spartanburg, a man will spend the rest of his life behind bars years after a robbery and a kidnapping.
Yeah, this is Frank Mills Jr. on your screen here. The 7th Circuit Solicitor's Office says he was tried and convicted of armed robbery, possession of a weapon during a violent crime, and 3 counts of kidnapping after an incident back in 2019. Mills went into the Holiday Inn Express near Westgate Mall holding a knife before threatening 3 workers and forcing one of them to open a safe. He then took off with boxes of cash. He wasn't captured until another robbery at a bank in Union County, and that was 2 weeks later. We were at the scene at Arthur's State Bank along Lockhart Highway. Deputies at the time said a suspect robbed the bank armed with a knife. Mills was eventually arrested in that bank robbery. The solicitor's office says that a victim in the hotel robbery recognized Mills from a news story after the arrest. He was later charged in a hotel incident. A judge sentenced Mills to 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole.